Hello, everyone. Welcome to Maddox Digital Plus Customer Success Summit. You are currently watching Building a Digital CS Approach, Practical Steps for Success. I'm excited to introduce our speakers, and as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question, what is your biggest digital addiction? First off, please welcome Marley Wagner, Fractional Digital Customer Success Leader at Marley Wagner Ltd. Marley, what is your biggest digital addiction?
My answer to this question I think is a little ironic because right now it is unsubscribing from emails that I don't want to read. Because guess what? If they're crappy, I don't want them.
Nice. Thank you, Marley. Next up, please welcome Gina Frazzi, Senior Director of Digital Customers Experience and Education at User Testing. Gina, what is your biggest digital addiction?
I think I'm a little bit of a data geek where I think it's more around tracking dashboards and seeing how kind of patterns emerge from all of the digital stuff we put out there. So I'm kind of like people binge watch on Netflix, and I'm binge watching on dashboards.
I can definitely relate to that one.
Yeah.
Please welcome Jess Osborne, Customer Success Lead at DeepL. Jess, what is your biggest digital addiction?
I'm going to go with one that I'm sure a lot of people on this call are also feeling right now. I'm so addicted to ChatGPT. I've gotten to the point where it's don't ask me, ask ChatGPT. Like, why are you asking me? I think it's just such a helpful tool.
I think I can relate too much to that one as well. Please welcome Michael Campanovo, Director of Customer Success at ShareID. Michael, your biggest digital addiction.
I'm going to go with something that where I can detach. So I'm an Audible and Libby listener. So when I'm traveling, when I'm walking the dogs, I think it's really great to disconnect and, listen to a book or listen to a story. And got into some spy novels and things of that nature. So it's a really good way to disconnect from, the real world when you're walking around and you can't hear anything else. So that's where I'm going to go with this one.
Awesome. And then last but not least, please welcome Seth Jones, Digital Success Lead at Vanta. Seth, what is your biggest digital addiction?
Yeah, I separately outside of work, I'm very interested in the FIRE movement, which is financially independent, retire early. So my biggest digital addiction is Copilot Money. It's a budgeting app. I think I check it maybe 10 to 15 times a day. So it's pretty much just sort of helping me kind of track and sort of get to my goals of what I want to do, which ultimately is not work.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your wonderful responses, and I will let these panelists take it away.
Thank you so much. As mentioned, I'm Marley Wagner. I will be your host and moderator, if you will, for the next 40 minutes or so with this fantastic panel of folks. We put this specific group together because everyone on your screen today is a practitioner of digital customer success. We have all been there, done that, seen it, been through the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the crazy moments and the really exciting ones. And so the focus of our session today is really going to be about sharing that practical advice, those real life experiences. I want to start our conversation by talking about the why behind digital customer success. There are a number of different drivers that can really be that spark to initiate a new digital CS program. So I want to ask a couple of members of our panel to share for them and their company and their unique environment. What was that why? What was that initial spark? Gina, I'm going to go to you first.
Yeah, absolutely. We recently merged our platform together with user Zoom and user testing, and we were kind of looking all of our future growth and what that meant for us, and it was very, very clear that clearly the high touch model wasn't going to scale for us. We had to give our customers that consistent, impactful experience across the board, whether they had a named CFM or not. And so clearly it wasn't just about that efficiency, it was about empowerment. And so we came together as a team, just looking at everything that we had available and knowing that our customers were digital first. We knew that they were all about self-paced, right? They wanted that flexibility. And the more you know about your customers, I'll say the better, right? And because I also sit over the education team, that intuitive guidance and getting them where they needed to be. So the digital programs we built fit that need of meeting them where they are. But basically, more of the cherry on top of all of this was how do they interact with us so we could be more proactive and then we can be more relevant. So it was all of that combined, which is really putting this in place and putting this forward. So
Gina, I love that you mentioned both kind of, some internal efficiency needs as well as customer demand. Michael, I'm curious to hear from you. What was that why behind digital CS for you?
I think it's for us, specifically around efficiencies, especially when it comes to meeting our customers for an EBR or QBR. We definitely want to be very strategic in our conversations and our engagement with our customers. And in order to build out a really powerful deck, having that efficiency so the customer success manager doesn't have to spend hours building this deck slide by slide, pulling the metrics in, and having something that essentially does that for them automatically in a matter of clicking a couple buttons where they can then go back through it and proofread it and make some tweaks. That efficiency has proved huge for our customer success managers rather than having to spend time digging into these decks where we can, as admins, go in there, make sure there's the appropriate slides, pull in the appropriate data, especially if things are changing through the quarter or through the year. We can make sure those slides are in there that they can just find easily by clicking a button rather than having to go search all these different places within our ecosystem. So efficiency is the name of the game for us, especially how we're trying to meet our customers and be more strategic with them.
Love that. And love the plug for Maddox platform as well. They are the best at those automated.
I have many plugs for the team.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. We use it as well, and not even just for CSMs, starting to get it out there through some of the sales teams too. So yes, absolutely, efficiency there.
So after that initial why, the reason behind building digital, comes the first step of actually making it happen, right? Starting that digital journey, building the first V1 of digital CS at your company. Looking back, I'm wondering if any of you have recommendations on what are the very first things that folks out there should do if they're just starting on their digital journey, and maybe feel free to share a story if you have it on things you wish you would have done differently in that regard. Jones, I'm going to hop over to you for this one to kick us off.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, the first thing that we focused on was really actually building out our first customer journey. So I think that before you can even sort of start the process of where you want to scale or where you want to put automation or where you want to use AI, I think the first step is actually just figuring out what are your customers doing? What do you want them to do? What do the CSMs do in that process? And actually mapping that out. For our team, we actually did it in very close sort of collaboration with our engineering and product and design teams, so that what we were actually trying to do was almost create a unified language across GTM and EPD so that we were all sort of moving the boat in the same direction, which I think generally is a little bit hard, especially as you scale and grow, to not have those silos. But what we actually did is we really anchored on the customer journey as the thing that we can speak the same language of what are we trying to go do? What are we trying to do from a product perspective? And what are we trying to do from a GTM perspective? So the first step for us was actually just listing out the customer journey. And I think that that can start to get very complex. So I would say keep it as simple as you can for the stages. If you are just getting started, you can use something simply like onboarding, adoption, renewal, expansion. What are you doing in adoption, in onboarding? What are the exit criteria for that? What are you seeing that the customer has done from a product perspective, or even from qualitative feedback from the CSM to indicate, great, they're out of onboarding and they're into the next stage. So once you actually can map that out, even if you use very simple stages, I think that's probably the first step that you need to take to really start figuring out where you want to start sort of inputting each of these different kind of digital success motions, whether that be automated product, sort of email marketing, whether you want to do in product nudges, webinars, but the first step is really just mapping out the journey.
Yes, love that. That's always my advice on where to start as well. Gina, would love to hear your thoughts on this. Where did you guys start? What, looking back, could you or should you have maybe done a little differently as well?
Oh yes. So the journey, my gosh, every year it seems like we start this conversation over again. But I will say, and I echo what Seth said as well, is just starting with clarity. if I could say it in the most simplest terms, starting with clarity, what does success look like for your customer? And then what does it look like for your business too? Right. And I agree, like every stage, look at that. What does it look like in that certain stage? And make sure you don't move on until you figure that one out, right? You pick one segment, you pick one play. For example, like we've done our digital onboarding track, right? We got it out there, we piloted it and see how that, where that works, right? What we need to learn from that. So you measure, you iterate, you learn, and then, it can't only be the CS only initiative, right? And like you had said, bringing in product. Product needs to come in for feedback loops. Marketing needs to come in. What's the messaging look like? RevOps, don't forget about RevOps. That's one thing that we did forget about. Bring in RevOps because that's got to make the data flow, right? So all of that piece. And then, alignment and all of this, I'm telling you, is going to save you so much rework later. And that's the one thing that I wish we kind of did too. A lot of rework, but we finally got there. And those are the lessons that we've learned.
Yeah, I think that's an important lesson too. We tend to really want to move very quickly, particularly when we're talking about digital, right? That digital has sort of a fast-paced, quick vibe. I get it. But I think taking the time to slow down just a hair, just enough so that you are starting with intention, starting all on the same page with all of those cross-functional teams and with your customers as well, giving them, sort of a heads up about what's happening and what's going to be new for them is absolutely critical to the long-term success. And exactly like Gina said, you will save yourself so much time in the long run by just moving a teeny tiny bit slower when you very first start. Love that. So I know we already talked about how much we love Matic and how wonderful they are and their platform is. I want to talk about the other technology investments that you and your teams have made. Feel free to name drop products if there are ones that you especially love, but we can also just talk about, functionality and purpose and product categories up to each of you. The technology behind a digital CS strategy is critical, right? We're talking about digital. It's all, yes, humans are fantastic, but like we can't automate by ourselves, right? We need the technology to actually make that reality that we've cooked up in our brains come to life. So I want to talk about some of your most impactful technology investments, as well as maybe any pitfalls to avoid when selecting tools as well. Let's see, Jess, I want to bring you into the conversation.
So I think when you're evaluating the technology, having a really clear perspective of what you want to accomplish, as Gina was just saying, is so critical. And for us, at different points in my career, we've had the vision of being able to visualize that customer journey. Back to what Jones was just saying, you need to be able to not only have a concept of what your customer journey is, but then also be able to actually see the customer journey. And for me, the most transformational tool that an organization I've been a part of adopted was Gong, because suddenly you could see all of the interactions, the emails, the recordings of the conversations, what was promised in the sales cycle through to where we are in delivering that to the customer, and then using AI to be able to surface trends within those conversations, as well as to be able to coach your team directly on that. So I'm a big fan of Gong. Should we get to the pitfalls now, or should we pause on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the other side of the coin, I feel like CSPs can be very tricky, particularly when you have the Lamborghini of a gain site where it's very customizable. And so I have face planted in many an organization implementing gain site due to the data quality and structure and the ability to integrate that into the tool. And I think understanding where your data quality is before you start to implement a tool like that is really critical to avoid a faceplant moment.
Great call out. Really, really important. Anytime the complexity of your tool goes up, guess what? So does the work involved to implement and administer it. Great call out. Seth, what are your thoughts? Tech stack, what's made the biggest impact?
Yeah, for sure. I love your call out, Jess, in terms of like making sure that your data is good before you use the CSP. We also use the CSP, but what I was going to sort of chat through was AI is kind of the most important thing, it seems, that everybody wants to talk about. One of the things that was biggest for us was we actually implemented an AI chatbot in our product. And so for Vanta, we just happen to have a product that brings a lot of very technical users who have a lot of very obscure, specific questions that kind of sent our CSMs running in, I would say, into 25 different directions, trying to figure out how to answer these questions, especially the new ones. They just didn't have the context of understanding all of these things when they started. And so one of the things that was huge for us is we actually built a repository of information using our help center articles, our Zendesk tickets, and actually had a chat bot that sat in the product. The tool was called Decagon. They're still pretty small, but they're doing really good work if you want to check it out. But essentially now we almost created a way for customers to be able to get those answers that are very specific to compliance and security without having to actually talk directly to a CSM. And then if for some reason they got stuck in that flow, it went directly to our support team. So it actually created this nice workflow where customers could get the answers that they wanted at the time that they wanted, right? So if you're really thinking about like digital CS, I think one of the most important things and the biggest value add, especially when you're trying to like sell it to other people in your company, is our customers are going to get way faster answers, right? Like at any time, if they need help, like we will provide them the resources that they need. And that AI chatbot, I think, took us from sort of where we were and where we actually wanted to be. It really helped to close that gap for a lot of our customers.
Yes, great call out. I 100% agree that the like answers that they want when they want them is a really big selling point. And guess what? Something that customers are like, WTF if they can't get at this point. So love that. Who else wants to talk about this? Michael, you want to pop back in and talk about tech stack?
Yeah, sure. I think, when I think about the tech stack, I kind of go back to my CSM days and working with customers and what problem are we trying to solve? So then I look at that internally. What are we trying to solve to better our CSMs, to make us more strategic, to make us, have the right messaging? So yeah, I'm going to plug Luster AI right now. It's a tool that allows us to kind of feed information in, and the CSMs and AEs alike to actually go through modules to get better at their messaging, get better at their elevator pitches. And then the coaching comes from the AI so that as leaders, we can actually review the results and do our own coaching if we need to. But the system continually gets better the more it's being used. So I really enjoy using it myself and then pitching it to the team, but really kind of looking at it from a perspective where we're going to get better and what kind of tools that we can really access to solve those problems and close those gaps that we may have with what we believe is our messaging to our customers, especially as things change in your organization as you continue to grow and scale, and that messaging changes. You want to make sure that the entire team is up to speed on how we want the messaging to go.
I love that everyone so far has called out different technologies that have really made the biggest impact. I see some similar threads, but I want to hear from everybody. So Gina, I want to hear from you as well.
Yeah, honestly, the shiny tools were all about, you can easily chase the shiny tools, right? But we kind of take a step back and look at the ecosystem. And I'll give a plug to Pendo. Pendo's been a lifesaver for a lot of our digital programs. But a lot of it too is ask yourself if the new platform or whatever you're after is going to integrate with your CRM, and how does that integration look? Because it really is all about outcomes. It's great if you got all these different platforms, but how are they telling that story? And also if you give your CSMs too much, are they getting clear signals or are they just getting a lot of noise? That's the other thing too to think about. So I love AI. We're dipping our toe in too. We're starting to use that a lot of in our guides. But we also have to remember that it's not replacing that strategic thinking that we want a lot of our CSMs and our teams to do as well, like how we can make these journeys and these touch points and how we get in front of our customers in a big way. So I would just say, just be mindful of over investing in tech without investing in the process and the people behind it first.
Yes, technology is not a magic button, everybody.
Right.
Very, very important reminder. Jones, you touched on what I want to talk about next, which is stakeholder buy-in, right? And cross-functional teams and getting everyone on board to even understand like what the heck digital CS is. let alone, you know, like we were just talking about, investments in it. We need investment, we need the technology, we need the people, we need the resources. And then we also got a fantastic question from Georgia, who's watching, that I wanna incorporate into this topic. She is asking about cross-functional collaboration, more as far as the hands-on component, right? We're gonna talk about buy-in at an executive level and cross-functional team as well. But in addition to, okay, who are you going to and what are those conversations like on the buy-in component? Who are you going to ask for help? Who's actually doing the building of whatever technology that we're talking about, the writing of the content, all of that. So I wanna talk about both of those facets of cross-functional collaboration. Let's see. Jones, we'll go back to you since you brought this up first as well.
Sure. And then which one would you like me to talk through?
You
both?
pick.
I pick? Okay.
All of the above.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
So
all the
I
above.
would say for Georgia, for your specific question, who actually did this, funny enough, I was doing this when I was still a CS manager. So the way that I actually started this process was like, I was taking direct feedback from the CSMs who were saying like, I don't have enough time to do XYZ because I am in X number of calls a day or X number of follow-ups. And so I actually took it upon myself to then go to our director and our VP and say like, this is something that's important. I actually, funny enough, I have like a whole presentation that I made where I literally like showed them the calendar of a CSM and was like, this is not possible to continue to do. And like, if we want to scale the way that we want to, this is what I think we need to go do instead, right? So I actually tried to like sort of quantify the pain of what a CSM was having to experience, and then sort of really kind of use different strategies to actually say, and if we were to change this, or if we were to segment our customers this way, if we were to, you know, start to doing an async kickoff call, like these are all the potential extra things that we could go get a CSM to do. So the way that we started it before I was in a role of digital success, I was just a CS manager who was like hearing the pain from my team and like trying to go and fix it in ways that I could. Now that we kind of like have fully invested in this as a company, I'm working a lot with our lifecycle marketing team. So the people who own HubSpot for us, I work very closely with our growth product manager. So he's hyper-focused on self-service. Then I myself live in revenue operations. So I'm working directly with the people who own our Salesforce instance, as well as like our regular, just like kind of CS operations team. And then of course, working very closely with our CS leadership and our AM leadership as well, right? So for us, it's really trying to figure out like, what is the messaging? What is the timing? How do we want to sort of align that with the other things that the customer is getting involved in? Because I think that this is like probably one of the things that keeps me up at night is like, how many emails do we send a customer from different teams, telling them to do something, telling them to do something else? And like, if we all don't get on the same page, then it really does turn into this fatigue that a customer experiences, which like we all have the right intention, right? Which is like, we want you to have the information and do the thing. But if you're getting that from product marketing, CS, it's like the customer is immediately overwhelmed and then starts to check out. So yeah, the way that it started was just me. And now I have a number of different stakeholders that I work with. And then in terms of like, how did I get those stakeholders to buy in? I'm big on, you have to speak the language of that stakeholder, right? Like if you're going to the sales team, you need to explain to them why this is potentially something that will allow you to close more deals, to onboard customers faster, right? If I'm talking to the product team, it's a little bit of a different conversation of like, and this is how we think that we're going to be able to like get customers to adopt faster. This is how we think we're going to get customers to actually like use the product in a more engaging way. But I think that the goal of any time that you're looping into a stakeholder, you have to try to understand like what is most important for them and how can whatever you're working on sort of fit into either what their goals are or what's important to them. Because like, we're all humans and like, we all want to make sure that the thing that we're working on is going to actually like positively impact what's important to them. So yeah, I would say as much as you can, try to speak the same language as the stakeholder and really tailor your messaging based on what team you're working with.
Yes. Yes to just all of that. There was a lot of head nodding on the panel during that, Jones.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of consensus there. I especially love your point about what the heck is everybody else sending? I have the good fortune of being a fractional leader, so I get to see inside a lot of different companies all the time. And one of the very first things I make almost all of my clients do is put together a company-wide inventory of all their customer-facing communications. And 100% of the time, well, okay, 80% of the time they tell me we're not sending anything today. And then 100% of the time it is way more than whatever they thought it was.
Right. Yeah.
So this is such an important exercise for every company to go through before you start throwing emails at anyone. Okay, who else wants to talk about this?
I'll say something. We actually had the same thing. We had a campaign internally called Clear the Clutter, right?
Yeah.
Because we had that as well. But I will say too, the minute you get any win, like if you're piloting a digital program or anything like that, and there's some really good early insights, that's a win. Talking about to your stakeholders, go celebrate that, go show them, right? You do have to speak their language and know what group you're talking to. But some of our stakeholders, attention span of a gnat, so we get that. You got to be quick, you got to get in and out. You can show some early data and some early wins. And even if you're asking for more teams involvement or budget or whatever, look what's possible and look what we could do if we had more, if we threw more at this, right? So as soon as you get that little nugget, that win, start shouting from the rooftops.
Yes, yes, love that. And a little shameless plug here. My solo session later this afternoon, it's the last session of the day, is all about this, how to prove ROI and get buy-in. So come back for more tips on that topic from me later as well. I will keep my mouth shut until then. But Michael, did you want to speak to this topic as well?
Yeah, I mean, both Gina and Joe nailed it. The one thing that I will add in here from my perspective, especially with my company, our leadership has put in place this year. I mean, we all have goals when it comes to retention, it comes to expansion and new logos, acquisitions. But what we're looking at this year is that we're all team revenue. So when we all have that mindset, getting stakeholder buy-in, cross-functional partners when it comes to customer marketing, when it comes to product, when it comes to RevOps, it's easier to have those conversations because we all have those same goals. So when we're all aligned that way, it's not a hard conversation. And to Jones's point, really understanding the bandwidth of your CSMs, what they're asking for, what they need, so that can resonate through these other departments as well. So they understand what we're dealing with on the CS side, because we are the face of our company. We're the ones that talk to the customers more than anybody in our company. So hearing that to other stakeholders in the company is beneficial, so that we can all kind of achieve those goals that we have in front of us this year.
Was that the case when you first started building digital CS, or is that a new change?
This is a new change. I mean, it always should be that way, quite honestly. I mean, I think in my past companies, it's never had that same kind of leadership down, kind of speaking to the whole company that we're all team revenue. And I really appreciate that our leadership has come in and made those adjustments so that everybody has that same line of sight, and we're all kind of geared toward those, North Stars or whatever term we want to use. But that's what we're all driving towards. We have a lot of goals and they're lofty, like every company does, but achieving them is going to be that celebration that we all want to do, and we're all going to do it together rather than just in silos.
I'd love to add a practical tip. From my experience, I think you all covered it beautifully, but I also think there's an opportunity whenever there's a lack of clarity in terms of how teams work together to accomplish something. And so similar to Jones, you did for your whole team when you were a CSM and taking on a crazy project, if there isn't a process for how you collaborate to build something, leaning into that ambiguity and creating some clarity of what that could look like, or having a quick win based on knowing that maybe RevOps needs to get account planning rolled out and you've already got a template. And so you're like, hey, I have this, so you don't have to do this from scratch. That's how you can make some friends across and kind of build on the momentum to get something executed quickly.
Love that tip, Jess. Thank you for adding that in, because I think that's really important. Okay, I want to talk about, Michael described a really ideal scenario, right? Where everyone is team revenue, company is aligned cross-functionally. The reality is that not every company actually looks like that in practice today. Particularly, I think still when it comes to digital, right? I think most companies have come around to customer success needs to exist, right? But like, what's this thing called digital customer success? I think there's still a lot more questioning around that. And from my perspective, I think it comes from fear often, of people being like, ooh, digital customer success. Does that mean robots? Right? Does that mean my customers are never going to be able to talk to a human? And that can sound really scary. So, I'm sure we've all been through this, finding that kind of perfect balance, if you will, of digital engagement and human conversation. I want to talk about that. How do you find that balance? How do you, enhance the customer experience, meet customer expectations, improve efficiency, all the things we've talked about without losing that sort of human connection? Let's see, Gina, I want to come to you first on this one.
Yeah, this is so important. And in my mind, it's never about the either, the and, the either or. It's about the and, right? And so when we look at our journey stages, when we started to kind of peeling back the onion here and segmenting our customers, it was going, okay, what makes sense to show a digital guide here? Or where does it make sense to introduce a digital program? And then where does it make sense to add the human touch to really add that value? And so again, this goes back to kind of thinking through the journey. But for example, for our onboarding guides, yeah, they can be guided digitally, and they all are. Every single one of our customers is guided digitally through their very first time they enter our platform, and that serves a purpose. But then obviously the human has to come over and check in, see how they're doing. How's it going? How was that? And I think the most important thing here is you have to enable the teams to know what the digital is doing, because again, that could be a very disjointed conversation when they go through a digital program or they go through onboarding to actually launch the test or do the thing we wanted them to do. And if the CSM doesn't know about it, it's a weird thing, right? So enabling both to complement each other, right? So you want that human to, drive that retention and have that human conversation, but the digital efforts do not replace the relationships at all. I think they fuel them, right? And so that's why we're always, you test that balance, but it's like listening to what works and just adjusting as you go.
Love that. Jones, do you have additional thoughts on
Yeah,
this?
for
How do you guys
sure. I
balance
definitely
that?
kind of building off of what Gina said. I 100% agree that it starts with the customer journey and really starting to figure out like where are those sticking points, because I fully agree. When I think about digital CS, my goal is actually not to get to the point where everything is fully automated, right? Like I actually do believe that there is a purpose for CSMs. There are places where customers get stuck, and talking to a human is way better than them going and, getting lost in a help article somewhere, right? And so it's really starting to figure out what are those different interactions in your journey that customers can do on their own, right? And you're not going to figure that out right off the bat, right? You're going to have to see the journey, probably going to have to get some qualitative feedback from CSMs. You're probably going to have to look at the data to see if there's any sort of like adoption or engagement drop-offs. But ultimately, once you have that information, then you can start to say, great, this kickoff call, my team is literally saying the same exact stuff to every single customer. That probably can be a webinar. Whereas like this more in-depth implementation call is something where you literally need a CSM to sit there and have that conversation with them. And you can get a lot more done in a shorter period of time by using a human. So again, it's like, I would think about also just like generally what your product journey looks like. So for example, like Vanta is very labor intensive in the beginning, right? There is a high activation energy. Once you kind of get over that activation energy, it is a little bit more set it and forget it. So for us, we're like, we need to deploy humans in the beginning. We can start to do more automated stuff later. If you have a product that's the opposite, where it's like, listen, it actually is going to be easier for us to onboard people at a scale in a scaled manner, but then we actually need a CSM to come in that 6-month period and actually do a deep dive of an EBR or something like that, cool, then do that. But I do think it's really just about figuring out like, where are your customers getting stuck? If your customers are getting stuck somewhere, probably doesn't make sense to scale that right now, right? Like until you either your product gets to the place where it's a little bit more intuitive, or you have more marketing resources, but it ultimately doesn't make a ton of sense to just kind of blanket scale over everything. I think all that's going to do is sort of highlight to you where you already have problems, whether it's sort of what Jess was bringing up of like your data hygiene, or maybe a part of your process that's not working the way that you thought it would. But I do think that there really is something to be said for being intentional about where you're putting your digital stuff, your digital programs when you're first starting, to make sure that you're actually sort of not just saying, okay, customers, see you later, but actually really making sure that like those are things that they can do on their own so that you can free up the time for the CSM to have those more impactful conversations.
Yes, 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 yes. I want to answer this awesome audience question before I get to more of my questions. And anyone else watching, please feel free to throw more questions in the chat. We love answering questions that you have. We kind of just touched on this a little bit, but the question is about managing the ownership between digital CS and marketing when it comes to onboarding and adoption campaigns specifically. So this person, Kim, says they've struggled because their customer lifecycle marketing team has historically owned onboarding. So digital CS has had trouble finding space in the journey. I'm actually going to add a piece of general advice here before I pass to each of you to share how it works in your companies. People always ask me if like where this should live, right? Is it marketing or CS? My answer is actually, I don't care. My answer is that I care that both of those teams have agreed that that's where it lives and that's who owns it. And they have figured out how they're going to support one another. The actual like who owns it is meh. Right. So just keep that in mind. But I'd love to hear from anyone who wants to share just kind of what their org structure looks like in relation to marketing and who owns what. Feel free to jump in.
On one thing to what you just said is if they agree and if it's working, right?
Yes.
Because it's great if everyone agrees, but also that doesn't mean anything if it's not working for the customer. So if it's working and everyone agrees, great. If it's not working, then that should probably change. And my first thing that I would advise to this person is, have you actually looked at the metrics they're driving? Have they defined what adoption means and what usage is happening around that adoption, and how well are they actually driving towards that? Because there could be some value to be added in terms of making sure that it's as effective as it possibly could be. And I would try to get the data and analyze that and have a joint conversation with data, because also when it's tricky politically, let data be your diplomat. Bring the data, and then that can bring it forward. So sorry, Marley, that was
diplomat. I'm going to use that. I know, I love that, Jess. That's a great addition. Who else wants to jump in?
I will. Amen to that, Jess. And I just, as I kicked off, I said I love the data, but it's so true. Just let that be the kind of the tiebreaker, if you will. But what we have done, and we have a very close relationship with our customer marketing team and our team, and we've developed that, and we respect each other. And yeah, we went through some side steps there, and we had to get a lot of buy-in. But again, with some of these programs that we were launching, everybody had their part to play. We are using tools to help us bring together. So for an example, I'll say with Pendo, again, we use Orchestrate, but the customer marketing team owns those emails, those first email campaigns, right? So we now have created this synchronized dance, if you will, of, the email campaigns go out. We know when they click on whatever they need to do and the action we want them to take, they come in the platform. Our digital campaigns are there. All along, the CSM teams are in the know of what's happening. And then it goes to our plan hat, right? So we also use plan hat, and the CSM knows exactly what happened during those engagements. So we all figured it wasn't easy in the beginning, I'll be honest, but we did figure this out, and we all respect each other, and it is working, right? And so again, and we're measuring, we're iterating, and as new people come in, we're teaching everybody how this process works. And nobody is trying to kind of, kind of fight for their space. Everybody just works very nicely in the sandbox. So.
Yeah, another follow-up question from another person in the audience. Hi, Ashley. Good to see you. About who owns feature releases, new feature releases, and communicating about those. Gina, who owns that in your org?
So the education team, right? So our education team, we sit very closely with the product team. So when new features come out, we have a full content team that creates the content, the KB, all of the learning courses and everything as well. So our education team learns that, and then we go out and also enable all of the customer facing teams on all of that as well.
Love that. Who else wants to share? Who owns what? Marketing, digital CS.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think this is another one of those like slow down to speed up type of a thing, right?
Yeah.
I do think that like as you're starting, everybody is kind of doing a little bit of marketing, and there's like 25,000 outreach sequences, and you're like, this is not exactly what we want it to be. And then you start to get to the point where like the teams are fully built out. And so what we actually did is we said, listen, let's get myself in the room, our lifecycle marketer, and the person who owns our in-product notifications. And what we actually did as a team was really figure out like which tool makes the most sense for each of these different types of messages. And that will be the team that owns it, right? So I do think that it will take you some energy of getting everybody together and saying, this is how we're going to work on this stuff, and really not throwing things over the fence, and really providing that level of transparency so that we do know, okay, great, marketing is sending this. Okay, in product is sending this, right? And it's not always perfect. But for us, it actually was really helpful to figure out like, oh, great. Well, like a customer, our open rates on the emails that are coming from Catalyst are like 70%. Great. So then what are the messages that we want to send there versus a regular old marketing HubSpot email that like has a significantly lower open rate, right? And so for us, it was like the 10,000 foot view kind of emails of just like, hey, here's the thing, go do it, was like marketing, right? If it was like a, hey, you're off track and we need to get you someone to help you do the thing, that was coming out directly owned by me for CS. And then if it was just more of like, hey, and here's how you use this new feature while you're in the product owns that, right? So I think that we just tried to figure out like which team owns what tool, and then what message made the most sense coming from each of those tools.
Yeah, I love that. And great call out from Lindsay in the audience that's a fantastic way, Jones, of taking the human and some of the politics out of it too.
100%.
I love that strategy. Love that. We only have a couple minutes left, and I do want to get to one more question. I want to end this on adoption of your digital programs. Yes, of your product, but of all the stuff you're building, right? So how do you ensure that your customers are actually like reading any of the stuff that you write? To Jones's point, marketing emails have really low open rates. If no one's opening it, they're definitely not reading it. And they're definitely not doing the thing in the product that you want them to do. So how are you guys ensuring that customers are doing the things you want them to do based on those digital campaigns? Michael, let's bring you back in. We haven't heard from you in a minute.
Sure. Yeah, no, adoption's always, it's a tough one, whether we're trying to get them to adopt a product, whether we're trying to get them to open emails, open messaging. So, I mean, understanding the click rate, understanding where you're getting the most success from that click rate is also very important. I'd also say the messaging, and I'm very close with the customer marketing team here. We meet weekly, we collaborate on the messaging that goes out. And why I think that's super important is because from a CS perspective, we know our customers. We know what drives them. We should know what kind of messaging is going to get attraction and get their eyes to open and click on it and read it and take action. So understanding that is important for us because the customers are the bread and butter of the organization. So, leaning on the CS team has been successful for us because customer marketing can lean on us for messaging, can really tap into what we know about our customers. And then we see those results in the NPS, right? I mean, we do NPS twice a year, and it's super important that we make sure that when we're sending it out, the questions make sense, they're relevant, customers are going to open that, and and we learn on iterating every time. What's going to, create more responses? What's going to give not necessarily a higher score, but we want more responses. We definitely want to hear from our customers, and I think that's the most important thing is understanding where we can meet them, where they're going to actually take action and look at the information and the messaging that we're sending out.
Jones, I'll come to you for a last thought on getting customers to engage with your digital content.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's two-pronged for us. The first thing for us is really about designing a digital program, not for you as a company, but for your customers, right? So I think so often we get into this thing of like, we just have to fix our problems as fast as we can. but you'll see that the adoption is significantly lower when you use that strategy than when you build a program around like, how are your customers learning, right? Like, what are the things that you're thinking about? So like, for example, at Vanta, like our ICP is a 50-person CEO or CTO who's using the product for the first time. They don't want to get on a weekly check-in call, right? They want to make sure that they can access this information 24/7. If they want to use Vanta on Saturday at 10 p.m., like we need to make sure that we have the content for them, right? So I think it's really like building a program around how your customers want to learn and want to actually like ingest that information. And then I think the other thing too, kind of probing off of what Michael was saying, is figuring out what metric you're trying to improve, right? So that could be if you have an onboarding metric, if it's GDR is a little bit hard because it's a lagging indicator. But if there's something like, for us, we use a customer health score. So we're actually looking to see like, if this customer engages with this version of scaled content, like did their health score go up or down, right? And that's actually helping us really start to figure out what are these things that are working really well for us and what are the things that aren't. We also have a big revenue analytics team. If you don't have a revenue analytics team, which is totally reasonable, I would say use every survey in every tool that you get, whether it's a learning management system. Let people actually give you that feedback directly so that you can start to sort of iterate your process over time.
100%. Yeah.
Perfect advice to wrap up our session. Thank you all.
Awesome. And with that, we are at the end of our session. The recording of the session will be available early next week in our resource hub, and all summit attendees will be notified of when the resource hub is live. Thank you again to our wonderful panel, all of you. This was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone else for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.